Are you like most sales and other professionals who want to grow their wealth faster than what they are currently doing through their company 401k, even with that company match, the stock market, or just plain saving money? Would you sleep better at night if you had the financial freedom to be job optional in just 3 to 5 years through investing in real assets? Maybe you don't want to stop working, but wouldn't it be cool if you could retire a decade earlier than most? And do the traveling you and your family have planned for years while you're still young and can enjoy it? Let's face it, most busy professionals don't have the time or desire to take on more work outside of their W-2 to grow their wealth. On The Wealth Flow, each week we share the stories, the investments, and take a deep dive into the various asset classes that can deliver that accelerated growth to your portfolio passively. That's right, no extra work for you. Instead, we'll put your money to work. Learn what the 95% aren't talking about and join the top 5% of earners today on The Wealth Flow.
All right, welcome to The Wealth Flow. My guest today is Ben Kall. He is the former college football coach at Kansas State University. After getting married and only having one dinner at home with his wife prior to 9 p.m. for the first 6 months of their marriage, they realized that this lifestyle was not at all what he had envisioned. So he packed everything up, their entire life, into a 12-foot U-Haul, cashed out their bank accounts, and drove to Minnesota, where Ben was born, and moved with his parents in the basement and started his career as a real estate agent back in 2016. As of 2023, Ben owns and operates $65 million plus of real estate. He runs multiple companies and enjoys traveling the world. His portfolio consists of self-storage, multifamily, and triple net real estate. Ben's main business is the Legacy Investment Group, where he focuses on deal sourcing, raising capital, acquisitions, due diligence, and operations. Ben is also a licensed realtor at RE/MAX Results and has been inducted into the RE/MAX Hall of Fame with 20 million plus sold in the past 5 years. Ben's team at RE/MAX is the Legacy Realty Group, which provides brokerage, development, investments, and third-party property management services for single-family, multifamily, and commercial real estate, and is consistently ranked in the top 5 within their RE/MAX franchise. Ben, welcome to the show.
Hey, Keith, thanks for having me. That quite the intro. I don't even know if we need to do a podcast today.
Right, Ben, No, quite a bit there, but that's okay. I'm sure we're going to take a deep dive on a lot of these things. But Ben, typically what I like to do is just start with where you grew up and what I'd love to hear about the college football coaching and kind of what led you to that, but then eventually to real estate.
Oh, no, you bet. So I'm from Rochester, Minnesota, born and raised, one of 3 kids. As you kind of mentioned, sports was everything to me growing up. I played 4 sports in high school. I knew that if I was going to go to college, I needed to play sports as well. You know, I got decent grades throughout high school, but sports were the reason that I had to keep good grades to stay on the team, and my parents allowed me to play. So, as I thought about college, I knew that if I was going to play sports in college, I wanted to do it at the highest level if I was going to put my body through it. Specifically playing football. I was a fullback, so I ran into things for fun. And so if I was going to do that, I wanted to do it at the highest level. As a competitor, you always want to achieve and play at the highest level possible. So I got the opportunity to do that at Kansas State University. I got a degree in kinesiology along the way. I can admit it now because I've been out of sports for a while, but you eventually know that you're not going to play in the NFL. And so my goal was, I had a degree in kinesiology. I got a minor in leadership. And what I wanted to do after I got done in college was train guys for the NFL Combine. If you can't play, coach. So that was on the path that I was on. And as I was about to graduate from undergraduate school, my actual running back coach approached me and said, Ben, we're going to be opening up a couple new positions on the team. I think you would be a good fit, and I think you would make a good coach someday. So if we're able to hire you, would you stay around? And the immediate answer was, yeah, I get paid now to coach. I get to wear sweatpants every day. I get to stay in a college town that I love, and I get to hang out with my girlfriend. I don't need to move. Seems like a no-brainer. So that was my first pivot. I did that for 4 years, learned a ton, and coaching at the Division I or Kansas State's in the Big 12. So we played schools like Texas and Oklahoma. So we got to do some traveling. We got to play in some pretty cool environments against some pretty good teams. And so as a single guy, ex-athlete, talk about an absolute dream job. But as you mentioned in the intro, I did get married, and every newlywed talks about their life, their vision, future kids, what they want to do, how they want to raise them, how they want to support them. And after about 6 months, I walked through the door and we had a hard conversation about this is not the life that we dreamed. And although this was my dream, it's no longer my dream. So what are we going to do? Didn't have a clue. I put everything into sports my entire life. And basically timing's everything. I got a text from one of my best friends that I grew up with. He was just starting to flip houses back in my hometown. He sent me a picture of essentially his check from his first flip. And I was like, oh, that looks fun. I'll come do that until I figure something else out. So as you mentioned, we just kind of packed everything up sporadically, moved into my parents' basement, married, and said, we're going to figure this out. This will hold us over for a little bit until we figure something else out in sports. And basically, I just jumped in head first and hit the pavement really, really hard and ended up enjoying real estate and never looked back.
Yeah, that's great. So how many houses did you end up flipping, or did you go a different direction as you started to get into that, or what did that look like?
So my buddy was the flipper and I was going to be the agent, was the initial dream plan. And I became a real estate agent buying and selling. So I technically didn't flip any houses with him. So I just was an agent buying and selling houses. As a young guy with no money, I said yes to everything and figured it out along the way. And so my first year, buying and selling houses, helping with new construction clients, saying yes to commercial leases, saying yes to commercial sales, selling hobby farms. And I learned so much those first couple of years. Over time, it taught me a lot and kind of added to my tool belt. And through that morphed my third-party property management company. So that's, I basically started as a broker, just selling and helping third-party clients. Then I started as a third-party property manager. And along the way, fast forward 2 years after getting started, was my light bulb moment that started my investment journey.
Okay. And that's even your real estate journey is a little bit unusual in the sense that sounds like you had some commercial leases mixed in there. You had some commercial in addition to residential. A lot of times it's one or the other. I mean, sometimes there's a little bit of overlap, but that's a little unusual. What do you attribute that to? Just that was what you were exposed to, or?
To be honest, I think I exposed myself to it by putting myself in the right situations. As someone who was never a salesperson, right? Never anyone who thought I would be earning commissions. I knew that I needed to essentially hunt for my business. And so when I was getting started, I would listen to, there weren't really great podcasts back then for real estate agents, but basically I was listening to scripts and trainings of, go door knocking, go to every business after hours, every networking event, everything you can possibly get in front of people, and let them know what you're doing. And so eventually it started to work. And I was never afraid of a challenge. And so if someone said they needed help finding a space for their business, I said, great, tell me more. They would give me all the information. I'd say, all right, we'll get started in a couple days. And I would just go home and do homework. I would call people. I would learn, what questions do I need to ask? What do I need to know? And so I just kind of learned on the fly. And that's what opened up doors to, the commercial and investment side because I started working with business owners and investors.
Yeah, that's cool. When you say your eyes were open to the commercial investment, you were working with clients, they're already doing this. Maybe you're working with folks that actually have the spaces available. What really kind of opened your eyes about that seemed like it was a direction you wanted to go?
Yeah, two things. My first listing for a commercial lease, some commercial space, was in a mixed use apartment development where I was leasing essentially space on the main floor for commercial tenants. And so, along with that, I got to meet the owner of the building. And the owner of the building and I built a pretty neat relationship. And every time that he would talk, he would say, "Ben, when are you getting into commercial?" And it was very cryptic. I had no idea what it meant, but every time we talked, we got through our conversation, then he would ask that. And I said, "Oh, I'm getting into it," and I had no idea what he was asking, so I never gave him the right answer. And then one morning, we always talked between about 5:30 and 7 in the morning. And it would always start with, "Ben, are you up yet? I've already gone for a run and I'm almost leaving the office. We got to get business done quickly. This is what commercial guys do."
Yeah.
They're out of the office before 10 a.m. And finally, this script would kind of happen over and over and over. And I finally said, "Mark, what the hell are you asking, or what do you want from me?" And he says, "Ben, you need to stop selling and you need to own things. Commercial real estate is what you need to do." And I just said, "Okay." And that was the end of the conversation. And it kind of started to click of what I needed to learn next.
Nice. Okay. And so he had this one building that, kind of allowed you to be introduced to him. Did he have several other assets as well, or? Yeah.
Yeah, he's a pretty big player. I think at this point across the country, but locally, yes, he owned multiple commercial buildings with apartment buildings, hotels, and then like strip centers, like triple net strip centers.
Okay. Cool. That's neat. And so then how did you get involved with it? Obviously you were helping out with some of the leasing, but when were you first, when did you put some money into one of these?
So my very first, other than my first house that my wife and I bought eventually after we moved out of my parents' basement, my very first investment ever was a self-storage facility that I partnered on with a client of mine who I had already managed some of his properties. So my first ever investment or exposure to investing was a self-storage facility. It wasn't something that we were actively hunting for. It was just an opportunity that presented itself from a lender that I worked with for some of my clients, and just happened to be the lender for my eventual business partner. He brought us the opportunity off market because essentially the seller was a widow, husband that passed away, and she had ran the storage facility for a couple of years, wanted to retire, and she didn't really know what to do. So she called her trusted lender and said, "Do you know anyone that might want to buy this? Help me do it." And so the lender called myself and Adam, and we just kind of looked at each other, did our due diligence, looked at numbers, and kind of took a run at it. And didn't really know what we were doing, but we trusted each other. And we had a good partnership in what we were doing, with me as his third party operator and him as the owner. And so we bought our first storage facility and never looked back. And that's kind of what kicked off my actual investment journey.
And from there, what did you go to next?
So the first the first deal being self storage, which is nothing I knew anything about, nor did my partner, and being our first investment, I was scared out of my mind. So we didn't do anything quickly after that. It took a little bit, and it took some proof of concept that we were running the business properly. Now I can say that self storage is more of a business acquisition than a real estate purchase from an operational standpoint. But back then I didn't know that. So to answer your question, we went a little bit slower, but our next three acquisitions were self storage, and then we ventured into multifamily and eventually the triple net space a couple of years ago.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Why did you make the transition to the multifamily space eventually?
Yeah, that was just, I think, a natural transition. As a broker and property manager, I was very, very familiar with it. I understood it. I understood the markets that we ended up buying in really, really well. And so it was just natural for us that if opportunity came across the table, we should do it. And I already had experience, like I said, acting as a broker. So I understood the finance and underwriting side, but I also understood the operational side because I'd already been managing it through my management company. So it was just a really natural transition to us to kind of diversify to have self-storage and multifamily in our portfolio.
Okay. And on the self storage that you had, the three different self storage units, uh, were you managing? Was your property management company managing that as well?
Yeah. So I was a third party property manager for about 2.5 years for other people, managing everything from single family to multifamily to workforce housing, and then eventually larger triple net strip centers where we had tenants such as, Chipotle, Verizon, Panera, Cold Stone, some big national tenants. So I already had a pretty good grasp on the operational side.
Hmm.
And I think we did a pretty good job at it. So I said, if we're going to own these ourselves, we're going to continue to manage them in house so we could kind of control as much as we possibly could to hopefully produce higher returns than if we were going to, delegate out to a third party who might not care about the properties as much as we did.
Yeah. And then you got into, you said triple net. Tell me what type of triple net. Obviously, that can vary quite a bit, but what type did you get into? And maybe for the benefit of the audience as well, some of the advantages and what really kind of separates triple net from, just your typical commercial.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. Obviously, multifamily, self storage, mobile home parks are all really popular asset classes that get talked about quite a bit. Essentially, what triple net real estate is imagine your local shopping center. You go to Target, and in the parking lot sits another little building with, like I said, Chipotle and Verizon, and that is what's called a lot of times there's different lease structures, but to keep it simple, that's a building where you have multiple tenants. So it's like glorified buying a fourplex, right? You have multiple tenants that help diversify your risk because now there's multiple people paying bills. But what triple net essentially stands for is that imagine like a single family house where your tenant pays for or does their own lawn care, snow removal, and utilities. Triple net is somewhat comparable, to dumb it down a little bit, where your tenants in a commercial retail center are going to be paying your property taxes, your lawn care, your snow removal, your roof maintenance, your parking lot maintenance. So it is advertised as a more passive investment. I can tell you now from experience over the last few years, even though it appears that way and is more so hands off than operational, if you're going to manage your own storage and multifamily, it's very heavy on the bookkeeping side of things to ensure things are getting done properly. But again, the reason we got into it was because self storage and multifamily became a very, very popular asset class. It got talked about a lot on podcasts, so it became popular. So it became harder and harder to find good deals that penciled for us. So we knew that if we wanted to continue to, grow and scale at the pace that we wanted, we had to look into another asset class. And so when we did that, I basically kind of looked at essentially my knowledge base and what we had been doing through my management and brokerage business and said, where could we go and try something new that we're not going to be starting from scratch and potentially, miss something or get taken advantage of us because we're the new guys. And that was triple net real estate. We'd already been managing some. And so in 2020, we started investing in triple net retail centers.
And with did you have, since you were managing some, and did you already have a relationship with some of, you mentioned Chipotle? I know a lot of times when the property manager has some type of a relationship with some of those franchises, it's like, okay, we've got a space actually that would work good for that. You have an opportunity to introduce them to that.
So we did. It definitely helps having some pre-existing relationships. If you driving home from work today or running errands this weekend, just pay attention when you go to Target. Look at some of the other what they call co-tenants at some of the strip centers in the parking lot. A lot of the big national tenants like to follow each other. So you might see a Verizon next to a Panera or a Five Below next to a Boot Barn or, some of those things. So if you have a vacancy, meaning somebody moves out, and you have another co-tenant, you might know who you might be able to call to see if it would be a good fit. Now, you have their number, but they're large corporations that work in Dallas and Atlanta and Nashville and all over the place. So you don't have an actual relationship with a human being. You have a phone number to a corporation.
Right.
So it sounds nice to have a relationship, but it's a lot more difficult than just picking up the phone and calling your buddy who works at the location down the road.
Right. No, it makes sense. Makes sense. And so, tell me, I guess, a little bit about your the triple net. How large of a shopping center or strip center was the first one, and what are you in the process of buying, or what does your portfolio look like when it comes to that?
Yeah. So our very first triple net center, it was my first out of state investment actually as well. To kind of touch on that a little bit, being an operator of our own everything that we own, starting from scratch and kind of bootstrapping it to grow. Um, I was the guy for the longest time that would mow the lawn, plow the snow, clean the carpets, paint the apartments during turnovers. And I knew that wasn't sustainable if I wanted to continue to scale at what was in my mind. And
Mhm.
so a big pivot for me is I hired a business coach, and they challenged me to invest out of state so I could force myself to learn how to delegate. And kind of
Hmm.
sounds silly, but part of that was our pivot into triple net real estate. And the second piece to that is he challenged me to invest out of state so that I had to force myself to build a team that could support me when I couldn't just drive there if something went wrong. So so I live in Minnesota. Our first out of state investment was a triple net retail building in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which is about 4 hours away. And it is a 5 tenant center in the parking lot of a Target.
Okay. Interesting. And I did the same thing with a short-term rental, just purposely bought it out of state because it does force you. I mean, it forces you to put some systems in place to be able to do it. So that's certainly can understand that. So what are some of the maybe challenges when it comes to strip centers, that kind of thing? And obviously, right now, you said I think you said you bought your initial one in 2020? Okay. And so how, obviously the market's changed a little bit since then. Is that still a viable option, something that you're pursuing, or have things changed a little bit?
So the answer is yes and no. There's been a lot of shifts in the market since then. That was kind of in the middle of COVID. Obviously, we've since gone through supply chain, inflation, skyrocketing interest rates. So I would say everything we've done, we've had to adapt along the way to ensure that we're not doing capital calls for our investors. We're managing our cash flow properly, and if and when we're going to refinance, how things may look to kind of protect our downside. But specifically in the triple net space, I would say the media kind of blew it out of proportion, that because office space got hit so hard,
Mhm.
everyone assumed Amazon was going to take over the world and every strip center was going to go vacant. What
Right.
we noticed is that location is the absolute number one thing that you need to look for. And the real estate department for Target, Walmart, Home Depot, those type of guys are probably a little bit more sophisticated than myself and our team are. So we want to follow those guys. If they're opening up new locations, if they're dumping millions of dollars into rebranding and refreshing their buildings, we're probably safe to buy things co-located or in the parking lot of those guys, because they're going to continue to get traffic. They believe in the location. So essentially, we just tried to follow them. And by doing that, we bought good location real estate. And people still need to go get haircuts. They need to go to physical therapy, chiropractors, nail salons. We like to find areas where we can place tenants where humans still physically need to go. We're not, I say triple net real estate or retail centers, but we don't necessarily like to have tenants that Amazon can do. We like to have tenants where humans still need to go physically get a service from them.
So give me maybe some examples of what kind of tenants you're looking for. I mean, obviously, I'm just thinking about the Target down the street, right? I'm thinking a couple different, places to get your haircut at there, liquor store, grocery store. There's just a ton of a gym as well. So what is that?
Yeah,
What?
you nailed. Yeah, you absolutely nailed it. And the piece with that, the to get a little bit more complex. Now you look at, is this a mom and pop first time business opener that's a chiropractor that's never run a business, or is this a chiropractic franchise that has 500 locations around the country? So then like you think of like multifamily, for example. Are you going to like your A class multifamily or your like low C class? And so like if you kind of think about it that way and really simplify it, all real estate's kind of the same. It's just, worded a little bit differently. So that's the same thing in what we're doing in the triple net space of how we look for a higher class tenant that might be the same as the guy down the road, but they're more business savvy, so they're a little bit safer.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes total sense. And so what are you normally aiming for? More of the A class when it comes to the retail stuff?
I would say we like B class
Okay.
because just like multifamily, we can typically go into a B class multifamily building. We do some cosmetic updates with paint and light fixtures and countertops, and you can up your rent. The same thing is true with kind of like B class or existing retail buildings. You can do what's called a facade improvement, basically paint the building. You change the signs on the building to be a little bit more modern than the 80s, and it attracts better tenants. So the same mindset that we had with branding our storage facilities and cleaning those up, or renovating apartment units, is the same concept in retail as well.
Okay. All right. What are maybe some surprises in retail? Things that you wouldn't necessarily think, or maybe that you discovered as you kind of got into that avenue of asset class.
I would say the biggest difference is when you're buying that asset class, yes, you're buying location in a building, but you're really buying leases. So the leases in place were drafted by business owners and savvy attorneys. So you need to pay really, really close attention to what's actually spelled out in the lease, because just like storage or multifamily, you need to honor the lease, except the people who are drafting these leases are typically a little bit more financially savvy and bigger law firms. And so you can learn a lot that it might look like the same lease from tenant A and tenant B, but there's a few different clauses in there that might change a lot. So we've gotten really good at paying attention to leases and lease review when we're essentially shopping for this type of asset.
So, give me an example, maybe on that specifically. What are some of the things that might be hidden within that lease that you need to be aware of or just
Yeah.
know about?
So yeah, two recent ones. Say you sign a 10-year lease with a tenant. All looks fantastic on the surface, except somewhere on page 30, there's a paragraph that says early termination rights. And essentially, they can terminate for no reason other than providing a 90-day notice. So you have a 10-year lease, it's marketed as a 10-year lease, but you start reading and they can essentially leave in 90 days with no strings attached. So that's a pretty big one that you see more often than you would think. And then more on a day-to-day basis with triple net, I explained a few minutes ago how the tenant pays for lawn care, snow removal, your building maintenance items. But they do it through what's called a reimbursable expense via CAM, which stands for Common Area Maintenance. And so essentially the landlord or me pays for those bills to ensure they're being done by credible service providers that have insurance, and everything that you would want to hire somebody. But it's being done and paid for by us. And then the tenant reimburses us monthly. So there's a clause that sometimes says, we are willing to reimburse you up to X percent of whatever the total annual budget is. Anything over that is what's called slippage. And that means the landlord has to pay whatever is over that kind of hurdle. So those little clauses are things that you need to look out for to ensure that your return profile is as advertised.
Okay. And on some of those, like the clause to be able to get out after 90 days, is that, let's say it's a property that you're trying to lease up and you're reviewing a lease coming in and, a potential tenant coming in. Are those typically negotiable, or are those, depending on the, company, pretty set in stone if you're going to accept a tenant like that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So our everything that we do, we like to add value. We don't typically like to buy, empty strip centers or just dilapidated apartment buildings. Stick $20,000 in per unit and increase rent. We like more the low B class apartments,
Mhm.
and we like to do the basic cosmetic updates and branding changes. And so that's the same approach on the retail side. And so part of our retail value add is lease structure. And so we have to honor the leases when you buy it, just like storage or multifamily. But at the time their lease is set to renew, we like to obviously renew them, but we like to put them on our lease. So there's some consistency between all the tenants, and we can try to flush out or get rid of those not so normal clauses. And then it is a negotiation to do that. And it's a give and take at that point. But we feel strongly there's certain areas that protect ourselves and our investors more so than others. So now that we've been doing it for a few years, we have an understanding of what we can kind of push and pull on to make it a win for everybody involved.
Okay. Sounds good. Interesting for sure. And what about, have you seen at any of maybe yours, or maybe you've seen this through your brokerage? But I think of a shopping center that has, say, like a Ross or something that's, really the big anchor tenant. And then for whatever reason, not to say they go out of business, but in some cases, depending, we had a lot of different stores, Barnes and Nobles and different things like that have gone, out of business, and they were the anchor. So what happens in that situation? Is that just a scramble to try to find somebody new to fill that space, or what obligations do they typically have if they terminate it early?
It all depends on the lease again.
Okay.
There are some really well crafted leases. For example, as an investor, for example, buying a Walgreens is seen as like your very safe A-class tenant. And they sign leases for up to 20 years. And if for some reason it's called going dark, but if they leave, their leases are so well crafted and landlord friendly that if they leave after 1 year, they will continue to pay rent, utilities, and all the bills for 20 years, no matter what. So it all comes down to risk tolerance
Mhm.
when you're working with different tenants and the types of leases that you have.
Interesting. And when it typically goes dark, and yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering about. Couldn't remember what it was called, but if they go dark, so they're still paying you, but they're no longer open. Is there an ability for the landlord at that point to release it and then maybe release them from their obligation? Once we've found somebody else to replace them.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So there's different ways to do it. Some lease structures say if we're going to release this to somebody else, you're released from your obligation to pay us. Other leases are written that says you're gone. You're going to sign that you left and you're going to pay us through the remainder of your lease. And then
Nice.
we sometimes have the ability to release it to someone else and essentially double dip for a period of time.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool. Okay.
So that sounds amazing, and it does not happen that way a lot,
Right.
but it has, and it feels really good in that instance.
Oh, I'm sure it does. Yeah. Awesome. And so, tell me a little bit about geography. Where all are you investing with Legacy Investment Group?
So we have really defined our buy box over the last few years. Our home base is Minnesota, so we have investments throughout the state of Minnesota, and then we just kind of naturally ventured into Iowa and Wisconsin. And then from there, so we're in Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Kansas right now are the four areas that we're in. But basically, what we've done with our buy box is we said where have we lived in the past or the present?
Mhm.
Where do we have trusted team members that have lived somewhere? And essentially what I'm getting at is, where do we have the most connections in markets that we really, really like, that we believe are strong and going to be growing in the future? So we've identified 13 cities essentially across the Midwest, ranging from Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, the Dakotas, and down to Missouri and Kansas, that we really like and feel comfortable with in growing markets.
Okay. And what are some of the factors within the economy that you're looking for within those places that help you decide that this is a place you want to invest?
Yeah, so we really like larger population hubs. For example, like Minneapolis, Des Moines, Kansas City, like big population centers. And
Mhm.
then we like to draw a ring 60 miles outside of that population center, because we might not be able to compete against the big publicly traded companies in like directly in Minneapolis, Kansas City, Nashville, Austin, Texas.
Makes
But we
sense.
know we can compete in those couple markets just outside of them. So we like big population centers. We like population centers where there's, say, a couple Fortune 500 companies that are growing. So those are kind of the two surface entry level things. But then from there, when we define like the cities that we're really interested in, we want to see cities that have grown from a population standpoint by 2% year over year for the last 5 to 10 years. A lot of cities, if you just kind of look up this data now, there's these little kind of like spurts of growth during COVID, like people rushing around the country because of mask mandates or election years. We like to see consistent growth of 2%, because that means populations are growing, businesses are doing well, and that means that we may be able to do consistent rent increases year over year, which helps our returns.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Very interesting. It's whole nother world. I really haven't had too many folks on that have been that much into the larger triple net, which I've always had an interest in. I've always thought it looked like a good investment, and it's always been kind of a neat to be able to say I own that corner or I own that shopping center. Tell me though, maybe let's go to a little bit on your real estate company. So you still have your real estate brokerage and team that are working.
Yeah. So,
Um,
our team is licensed through the Remax franchise.
okay.
I've been an agent long enough that I'm a broker, associate broker, but I have a team. So on our team we have 4 agents. 3 of them specifically do residential real estate, buying, selling, and new construction of residential. And then one other one does some commercial and management related items to kind of assist me. And so that's kind of how we've diversified our real estate team.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a huge deal to be in the Remax Hall of Fame, and so what do you attribute some of that success to? Just having been able to sell that much, grow the team, and do those kind of production numbers.
I think, to be honest, young, poor, and living in my parents' basement really motivated me to do a good job. Uh,
Yeah, that'll do it.
and to be super honest, I mean, it was, I think man, woman, to do that married, it's not a great feeling, especially when you move back to your hometown and you run into people and, oh, where are you living now? And so I just, knew that I needed to get out there and grind. And that's not to say like I'm a workaholic and have no fun, but I just worked really, really hard, and I surrounded myself with people who were further along than I was, both in their personal life and their business, to continue to motivate and help, as mentors. And so I just kind of watched other successful people. And, I never once thought I needed to recreate the wheel. I just needed to take little bits and pieces from other successful people and implement it into my business and my life.
Yeah, well, and it looks like you've certainly done that. And so, if people want to find out more about Legacy Investment Group, and first, maybe giving you your vision on Legacy Investment Group, where do you see guys headed in 3 years from now, 5 years, 10 years from now?
Yeah. So the Legacy Investment Group basically morphed because I, was a real estate agent in my hometown, and I started buying my own investment properties, and essentially friends and family asked what I was up to. And eventually they said, that sounds interesting. You guys are getting to travel a little bit more. How do you do that? And I said, well, I've worked really hard and we now have passive income that pays for our travel. So we never pay for travel. And that kind of like light bulb started a conversation with people that says, ooh, we really want that too. Can we invest with you? And at first I was really scared to take on, friends and family as investors, because now I'm essentially managing their money. I'm
Right.
managing their money for them to quit their job, to pay for their kids' college, to retire. And it scared the hell out of me. And I said no for years. And eventually I told you I hired a mindset coach. And he
Mhm.
said, Ben, look what you've built up. It's pretty neat. A lot of people wish they could have this. And so that's when I said, all right, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to try to do it as well as I possibly can. And that's when the Legacy Investment Group was formed. And since that time, we've done, as you said, about $65 million of real estate acquisitions. And we typically have anywhere from 5 to 30 investors in each of our deals with us. They're truly passive. They don't have to guarantee any of the debt. That's what myself and my partner do.
Mhm.
So basically, the way that the company works is myself and my partner find the deals, we structure the deals, we underwrite the deals, we go get the loans, we personally guarantee them, we close them, we operate them, and then hypothetically, you want to invest. You can invest 50, 100, 200, whatever dollar amount that's interesting to you, and it's passive. You get you get quarterly reports, you get quarterly distributions sent directly to your bank account. You get yearly financial statements. All your tax forms are done for you, and it's the most passive, hands-off way to invest, and it's through our company.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier than just going in. Like you started with the rental properties and different things, and it's just a lot easier to invest passively, I think, and you get to invest in a lot higher quality assets. So makes a huge difference.
And I
Um,
think that's a big thing, because a lot of people, I still encourage everyone that says, hey, if you want to do this and if you truly want to learn, go buy a house, go buy a duplex, go buy a fourplex. Like, if you enjoy and want to be an operator, I'm going to teach you absolutely everything you possibly need to know. And I will support everything and teach you everything I learned. But not everyone loves it as much as you and I do, right? Not
right.
everyone wants to deal with tenants and collect checks and change door locks and get leaky toilet calls, right? Like, it's a different set of problems. And so this was just an avenue for a lot of people who did not want to do that, but wanted all the benefits of real estate, from the cash flow, the tax benefits, the debt pay down, like all the array of benefits of real estate without actually having to do anything.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. How about as far as your investments go? What's the time frame that you're holding on to these? Are these long term? What does this look like for an investor that's interested
Yeah.
in?
So, our company's name Legacy, right? A lot of that surrounds because we believe that real estate is one of the highest appreciating assets that you can have,
Hmm.
and things get better with time. And so we've never been big into selling real estate. And so everything that we acquire, we like to tell all of our investors that we plan to hold on to it for at least 5 to 10 years. We'll refinance along the way, and we might set it up. And if a good opportunity comes, we might sell it in 5 to 10 years. But expect to be, hopefully happy with the checks that you get every quarter. And we want to build a lifetime of cash flow for you and hopefully future generations.
Yeah. Let's talk about that cash flow. And I know we're running a little bit long on time, but I have to ask about the travel. What have you been able to do? Obviously, you've built a team that can kind of help you to operate things while you and your family have an opportunity to travel. But where all have you gone, and what are some of the maybe bucket list trips that you're going to be doing soon?
Yeah. So it has been fun. And, part of, I guess, growing as a real estate investor, there's not a lot of people who actively all day full time do what we do. So you get introduced to different Facebook communities, different masterminds, coaching programs. And so a lot of my travel when I was getting started would be to go meet other people doing what I do, to have conversations, to learn and scale, as we've kind of talked about for the last hour or so. But through that has led to, building up some passive income that could support our personal travel. So we really like to explore other country, and a lot of it is, outdoors and experience related. So we were just recently in Canada. My wife and I flew to Canada to go sleep in an ice hotel.
Oh,
You're
nice.
literally, the whole thing's built out of ice. You sleep on an ice bed and a sleeping bag. Sounds crazy to some people, but pretty cool experience to say you've done it. As a developer and real estate guy, my big number one bucket list, we went to Dubai a few years ago to build an entire country in the desert in 30 years. And it's now the number 3 visited place in the whole world, is unbelievable. So if you like architecture, real estate, and development, Dubai is like heaven. So that was a really, really cool trip that I got to do a few years ago.
That's on my wife and I's list, and we haven't done it yet. But everybody we talk to that's been there is like, man, you got to go. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
you hear all the, call it the rumors of the Middle East. For a big city, on the level of like Chicago, New York, it is the safest, cleanest city that I've maybe ever been to. It is easy to navigate. There's no traffic walking or on the streets, because they built it in 30 years ago. So they thought through all those things. And it's pretty amazing. And I'd highly recommend everyone going, because what you hear is not true at all.
yeah. Have you done Singapore yet?
No, that's on the list. The Singapore airport seems really intriguing to me. But I honestly haven't had a lot of time to like actually study Singapore itself. But I have seen Crazy Rich Asians, the movie, and it does look.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We've flown there and we've stayed there a couple different times, but just an amazing city. But anyway, when you mentioned safe, clean, I mean that's kind of what they're known for there as well. So anyway, Ben, this has been really really fun. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed our time together. I have 2 other questions for you, but how can people find out more about you? And then I'll ask the last 2 questions.
Yeah. So the best place to follow me is probably on Instagram, Ben_Kall, Kall.
Awesome. All right. And then last 2 questions are, if you were to give some advice to somebody who's maybe just starting out in their investment journey, what advice would that be?
Just do it.
There you go.
The typical Nike slogan. You can study, you can listen to podcasts, you can read books until the day you die, but there's no better way to learn than actually just doing it. And it takes, I think, confidence is the biggest thing and proof of concept. So if you need to start with a house or a duplex just to get started, to prove to yourself that you can do it and what you learned actually works, to go a little bit bigger and play the game of Monopoly, to do what, Keith and I have talked about today, start with a house, then just continue to push yourself to grow even further.
Yeah, that's great advice. How about a book recommendation? Anything you've read recently? It doesn't necessarily have to be real estate related, but that's been impactful.
I would say the 3 most impactful books, they're talked about quite a bit, but Rich Dad, Poor Dad changed my life. Millionaire Next Door, that's another one. It's not as rah-rah as Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but as someone who started from kind of nothing, it really impacted our life to live within our means and have a goal into the future. And basically the quote that I love the most is, don't let your lifestyle creep until your passive income can support it. So that's something that, my wife and I would continue to reinvest. And now it's compounded to a point where we can actually live off our passive income.
Cool. Great books, great recommendations. And Ben, I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I think we'll call it a show.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me today.
Thanks.
Being that you're still here, I trust you found value in this episode. I personally wish I would have known these guests and strategies when I started my wealth creation journey. Go to wealthflow.capital to subscribe to our newsletter. And as a free gift, we will send you our quarterly market report and the top 10 things to look for in an investment opportunity. Take a minute to give our show a rating and review. Help us reach 1 million professionals by subscribing and sharing this episode with someone you know who could also find value in it.